Sarah Mitchell's arms ached as she dragged her worn carry-on through Newark Liberty International Airport, her 5-year-old daughter Emma's backpack slung over her other shoulder. The weight of both bags was nothing compared to the exhaustion pressing down on her after working a double shift at the diner, followed by 3 hours of emergency meetings with her landlord. They were being evicted, and this last-minute flight to Seattle wasn't just a trip, it was their chance at a fresh start. "Mom, are we going to miss the plane?" Emma tugged at her sleeve, her small face pinched with worry. Sarah checked her phone. 10:47 p.m. Their flight was at 11:15. "We'll make it, sweetie," she promised, though her heart raced as they rushed through security. Emma had been staying with Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor, while Sarah worked her shifts. The eviction notice had thrown their whole world into chaos, but Sarah's sister Kate in Seattle had offered them a temporary home and maybe even a job lead at her company. They reached their gate just as final boarding was announced. Sarah's hands trembled as she handed over their tickets, her mind foggy with fatigue. Emma clung to her leg, half asleep herself. The gate agent barely glanced at their boarding passes before waving them through. The cabin lights seemed to blur as Sarah made her way down the aisle, Emma trailing behind her. Row 4. That had to be right. She fumbled with their bags, trying to lift them into the overhead compartment with arms that felt like lead. "Let me help you with that," a deep voice offered. Sarah turned to find herself face to face with a man in an impeccably tailored suit. His kind blue eyes crinkled at the corners as he easily lifted their bags into the bin. He couldn't have been more than 40, with salt and pepper hair that somehow made him look distinguished rather than old. "Thank you," Sarah managed, too tired to feel properly embarrassed about needing help. She guided Emma into what she thought was their row, taking the window seat while her daughter curled up in the middle seat next to her. The well-dressed man sat down in the aisle seat, and Sarah couldn't help but notice how the rich leather seat seemed to embrace him like it was made for him. Something felt off, but her exhausted brain couldn't quite piece it together. It wasn't until the flight attendant approached with a tray of pre-flight champagne that reality crashed in. Sarah's eyes widened as she took in her surroundings properly for the first time. The spacious seats, the elegant lighting, the crystal glasses. This was first class. Their tickets were for economy. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, beginning to gather her things. "We're in the wrong seats. Emma, honey, wake up. We need to—" "Is there a problem?" The flight attendant's voice carried a note of barely concealed irritation as he looked between Sarah's clearly budget clothing and the luxury cabin. "These passengers are with me," the man in the suit interrupted smoothly. "I upgraded them at the gate." He pulled out a business card and handed it to the flight attendant. "James Crawford, CEO of Crawford Technologies. Please ensure they're comfortable during the flight." The flight attendant's demeanor changed instantly. "Of course, Mr. Crawford. My apologies for the confusion. Would you like your usual scotch?" Sarah sat frozen, her heart pounding. As soon as the flight attendant left, she turned to James. "I can't accept this. It's too much. We should go to our proper seats." James glanced at Emma, who had fallen back asleep, her small head resting against her mother's arm. "Look," he said quietly, "I've been where you are. 20 years ago, I was a single dad working 3 jobs, trying to keep a roof over my son's head. Someone showed me kindness when I needed it most. Consider this paying it forward." Sarah opened her mouth to protest again, but James held up a hand. "Please, the seats are paid for either way, and your daughter looks exhausted. Consider it a gift." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes as the weight of the day, the stress of the eviction, and this unexpected kindness overwhelmed her. "Thank you," she whispered. As the plane took off into the night sky, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something familiar about James Crawford. She was certain she'd seen his face somewhere before, but her tired mind couldn't place it. What she didn't know was that James was having the exact same thought about her, and that this chance encounter at 35,000 feet was about to change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. The plane climbed higher through the clouds, and Sarah found herself stealing glances at her unexpected benefactor. There was something in the way he carried himself, a quiet confidence that spoke of hard-won success rather than inherited privilege. He caught her looking once and smiled, causing her to blush and quickly turn her attention to the window. "Seattle's home?" he asked softly, mindful of Emma's sleeping form between them. "It will be," Sarah replied, then found herself telling him about the eviction, her sister's offer, the hope of a new beginning. She wasn't sure why she was sharing so much with a stranger, but something about James Crawford made her feel safe, understood. What she didn't tell him was how she'd been saving every penny from her tips at the diner, how she'd been selling off everything they didn't absolutely need, how she'd been taking online classes late at night after Emma was asleep, trying to build a better future for them both. Some things were too raw, too personal to share, even with someone as kind as James seemed to be. As the night wore on and the cabin lights dimmed, Sarah felt her own exhaustion winning out. The last thing she remembered before drifting off was James carefully draping his suit jacket over Emma when she shivered in her sleep, and thinking that maybe, just maybe, their luck was finally changing. Sarah woke with a start as the plane hit a patch of turbulence. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft glow in the pre-dawn hours. Her neck was stiff from sleeping at an awkward angle, but the leather seat was still infinitely more comfortable than anything she'd experienced in her years of budget travel. Emma was still sound asleep beside her, clutching James's suit jacket like a security blanket, her long eyelashes fluttering against her cheeks as she dreamed. James Crawford was awake in the aisle seat, reading through documents on his laptop. The screen's blue light illuminated his focused expression, and Sarah noticed details she'd missed earlier: dark circles under his eyes, a slight furrow between his brows, the way his shoulders tensed as he scrolled through whatever he was reading. Despite his polished appearance, he looked tired, human. His fingers drummed silently against the armrest, a habit that reminded her of someone, though she couldn't quite place who. "Bad quarter?" she asked softly, gesturing to his laptop. Her voice came out rougher than she'd intended, still thick with sleep. James looked up, surprised, then smiled. The warmth of that expression transformed his whole face, erasing years of careful corporate polish. "Actually, it's one of our best. I'm reviewing plans for a new community center in Seattle." He hesitated, then added, "It's a project close to my heart. We're converting an old warehouse in the Belltown district into a facility for single parents. Childcare, job training, support services, the works. It's taken 2 years just to get through the permitting process." Sarah's chest tightened as she thought about what such a place could mean for people like her. "That's amazing. But why single parents specifically?" She shifted in her seat, careful not to disturb Emma. James closed his laptop with a soft click, his expression growing distant. The cabin lights caught the silver in his hair as he turned to face her more fully. "My wife died when our son Marcus was 3. Cancer." He spoke matter-of-factly, but Sarah saw the old pain in his eyes, the slight catch in his voice. "I had a good job, family support, and it was still the hardest thing I've ever done. Not everyone has those advantages." Sarah thought of her own situation. No savings, no support system except her sister, and now no home. The weight of her reality pressed down on her chest. "No, they don't," she agreed quietly, watching as the first hints of dawn began to paint the clouds outside their window in shades of pink and gold. The flight attendant appeared with breakfast trays, moving with practiced efficiency through the cabin. The rich aroma of fresh coffee and warm pastries roused Emma, who sat up blinking owlishly at the fancy meal before her. Her dark curls were mussed from sleep, and James's jacket slipped from her shoulders. "Mom, look, real pancakes." Emma's eyes widened at the sight of the elaborate breakfast spread. Fluffy buttermilk pancakes, fresh berries, whipped cream, and real maple syrup served in a tiny crystal pitcher. And they're heart-shaped. Sarah helped Emma arrange her napkin and cut her pancakes into manageable bites, acutely aware of James watching them with a soft expression she couldn't quite interpret. As Emma chatted happily about the shapes she could see in her breakfast, pointing out that the strawberries looked like tiny hearts too, Sarah noticed James discreetly take a phone call. "Marcus? Yes. I'm on my way back. No, don't postpone the meeting with the architects. I'll be there." He paused, listening intently to whatever his son was saying. His free hand absently straightened his tie, a gesture that triggered another flash of familiarity in Sarah's mind. "Actually, I need you to add something to the community center plans. A cafe space, no, bigger than that. Something that could work as a full-service restaurant. Think about the training opportunities." Sarah's ears perked up at the mention of a restaurant. After 10 years of waitressing at places ranging from greasy spoons to upscale bistros, she'd finally completed an online culinary management course, though she'd never had the capital to do anything with it. The certificate was one of the few possessions she'd carefully packed in their hurried exodus from their apartment. James ended his call and turned to find Sarah staring at him. "Sorry," she said quickly, heat rising to her cheeks. "I couldn't help overhearing. It's just, I have some experience in restaurant management." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she'd never managed to break. "Oh?" James raised an eyebrow, encouraging her to continue. The morning light streaming through the window caught his eyes, turning them from blue to almost silver. Sarah found herself telling him about her course, her years of experience in every position from dishwasher to assistant manager, her dreams of opening her own place someday. She told him about the business plan she'd worked on late at night after Emma was asleep, about the recipes she'd perfected over years of experimenting in their tiny kitchen. "I know it sounds silly," she finished, embarrassed by her own enthusiasm. "It doesn't sound silly at all," James replied, his expression thoughtful. "In fact," he trailed off as his phone buzzed again. Reading the message, his face darkened. "Excuse me, I need to make another call." As James stepped into the galley to take his call, Emma tugged on Sarah's sleeve, her small face serious. "Mom, I like him. He's nice like Daddy was." Sarah's heart clenched painfully. Emma barely remembered her father, who'd walked out when she was 2, leaving nothing but a note and a stack of unpaid bills. "Honey, Mr. Crawford is just being kind, because he's a nice person. We probably won't see him again after we land." But Emma's words had stirred something in Sarah's memory. She pulled out her phone and opened the gallery, scrolling back years until she found what she was looking for. A group photo from her high school graduation. There in the background was a much younger James Crawford, standing next to her favorite teacher, Mrs. Crawford, the same nervous tie-straightening gesture, the same kind eyes. Sarah's hand trembled as the pieces fell into place. James wasn't just some random CEO, he was Mrs. Crawford's son, the same Mrs. Crawford who had believed in Sarah, who had pushed her to apply to culinary school, who had been there for her when her own mother wasn't. The same Mrs. Crawford who had passed away before Sarah could tell her she'd gotten accepted, before she had to drop out because she was pregnant with Emma. James returned to his seat, still frowning at his phone. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, her voice unsteady with the weight of her revelation. He sighed, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "Our project manager for the community center just quit. Family emergency. It's not the end of the world, but it's a setback we didn't need." He looked at her curiously, noticing her changed demeanor. "You seem troubled. Is something wrong?" Sarah took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "Did your mother teach at Roosevelt High School? English literature?" James stared at her, recognition slowly dawning in his eyes. "Sarah Mitchell. You were her favorite student." He shook his head in disbelief. "She talked about you all the time. She was heartbroken when you didn't show up for the scholarship interview." "I was pregnant," Sarah whispered, her voice catching. "I couldn't. I had to choose a different path." Emma looked between them, confused by the sudden tension in the air. "Mom, do you know Mr. Crawford?" Before Sarah could answer, the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their descent into Seattle. James was still looking at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read, surprise certainly, but also something else. Something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch in her throat. "We should talk more after we land," he said finally, his voice gentle but urgent. "About the community center, about everything." Sarah nodded, her mind spinning with possibilities. She'd spent years wondering what her life might have been like if she'd taken that scholarship, if she'd followed Mrs. Crawford's carefully laid plans for her future. Now, here she was, sitting next to Mrs. Crawford's son, who had unknowingly offered her kindness just like his mother once had. As the plane began its descent into Seattle, Sarah realized that maybe this wasn't just a coincidence. Maybe it was a second chance, not to change the past, but to build a different kind of future. She glanced at Emma, who was pressing her face against the window to watch the city emerge from the morning mist below, and then at James, who was pretending to check his phone, but kept stealing glances at them both. For the first time in years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. The Seattle-Tacoma International Airport buzzed with morning activity as Sarah, Emma, and James made their way through the terminal. Sarah's mind was still reeling from their conversation on the plane, from the impossible coincidence of meeting Mrs. Crawford's son. She clutched Emma's hand tightly, hyper-aware of James walking beside them, his rolling briefcase clicking against the polished floor. "My driver's waiting outside," James said as they approached baggage claim. "Please let me give you a ride to your sister's place." His offer was casual, but Sarah noticed the tension in his shoulders, as if he was afraid she'd disappear into the crowd if he didn't keep her close. Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed. Kate's name flashed on the screen. "Sorry, I should take this," she said, stepping aside. "Kate, we just landed." Her sister's voice came through thick with tears. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. There was a pipe burst in my building last night. The whole place is flooded. I'm staying at a hotel and there's no way you and Emma can—" Kate's voice cracked. "I should have called earlier, but I kept hoping they'd let us back in." Sarah's legs went weak. She leaned against a pillar, trying to keep her voice steady so Emma wouldn't worry. "It's okay, Kate, we'll figure something out." But her mind was blank. They had no money for a hotel, no other friends in Seattle, and now no place to stay. James approached, concern etched on his face. He'd been watching Emma while Sarah took the call, showing her how to track their luggage on the airport's digital display. Now, seeing Sarah's expression, he handed Emma his phone with a game on it and stepped closer. "Bad news?" he asked quietly. Sarah told him about Kate's situation, hating how her voice trembled. "I should have had a backup plan. I just never thought—" "Stay at my place," James said immediately. When Sarah started to protest, he held up a hand. "I have a 6-bedroom house that's far too big for just me since Marcus moved into his own apartment. There's a separate guest wing with its own entrance. You and Emma would have complete privacy." "James, I couldn't—" "Sarah." His voice was gentle but firm. "My mother would never forgive me if I left her favorite student stranded with a 5-year-old. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I have an ulterior motive. I meant what I said about wanting to discuss the community center project with you." Their luggage appeared on the carousel before Sarah could respond. As James efficiently collected their bags, Emma tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Mom, look what Mr. Crawford showed me. You can see our bags on the screen before they come out. It's like magic." Sarah looked at her daughter's excited face, then at James, who was now fielding another business call while somehow managing to wrangle all their luggage. She thought about Mrs. Crawford, who had always told her to be brave enough to accept help when it was offered. Maybe this was the universe giving her a sign. "Okay," she said when James ended his call, "but just for a few days, until Kate's place is fixed." The ride to James's house was surreal. His driver, Thomas, handled the morning traffic with practiced ease, while Emma pressed her face against the window, amazed by the glimpses of Puget Sound between the buildings. Sarah found herself stealing glances at James as he worked on his laptop, still struck by how much he resembled his mother in certain expressions. "We're here," James announced, as they turned onto a tree-lined street in Madison Park. Sarah's breath caught as they pulled up to a stunning craftsman-style home overlooking the water. Beautiful as it was, something about it tugged at her memory. Thomas helped them with their bags, while James gave them a quick tour of the guest wing. It was lovely. 2 bedrooms, a sitting room and a small kitchen, all decorated in soothing blues and greens. Emma immediately claimed the smaller bedroom, delighted by the window seat overlooking the garden. "I have to head into the office," James said, checking his watch. "But please make yourselves at home. Thomas can drive you anywhere you need to go, and I should be back by dinner. Maybe we could all eat together. There's something I'd like to discuss with you." After James left, Sarah unpacked their meager belongings and helped Emma settle in, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she knew this house. It wasn't until she was making Emma a sandwich in the guest kitchen that it hit her. Hands shaking, she pulled out her phone and opened her photos again, scrolling past the graduation picture to an older one. It was a photo of a magazine article about successful women entrepreneurs in Seattle. The main feature had been about Eleanor Crawford, James's mother, and her educational initiatives. The article included a picture of Eleanor in front of this very house, standing in this very kitchen. The caption read, "Eleanor Crawford in her beloved kitchen, where she taught cooking skills to underprivileged youth for over 2 decades. Sarah had read that article dozens of times as a teenager, dreaming of being one of those students in Mrs. Crawford's kitchen. She'd never made the connection until now, but she remembered Mrs. Crawford mentioning weekend cooking classes, remembered the way her eyes lit up when Sarah talked about wanting to open a restaurant someday. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Thomas. "Mr. Crawford asked me to give you this," he said, handing her a thick envelope. Inside, Sarah found a stack of papers. Her heart nearly stopped as she read the first page. It was a proposal for the community center's restaurant space, a training program for aspiring restaurateurs from underprivileged backgrounds combined with a working restaurant open to the public. The proposed name at the top of the document made her eyes fill with tears. Eleanor's Kitchen. But it was the last page that made her sink into a chair, her legs unable to hold her. It was a letter, dated just 2 weeks before Mrs. Crawford passed away, addressed to James. My dearest son, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you about Sarah Mitchell myself. She reminds me so much of you. Brilliant, determined, with a passion for creating things that bring people together. I had such hopes for her future in our program, but life had other plans. If you ever cross paths with her, please give her the chance I couldn't. The restaurant space in your community center project, that was always meant for her. All my love, Mom. Sarah's vision blurred as she read the letter again and again. Mrs. Crawford hadn't forgotten about her, had somehow known even then that their paths would cross again. The realization left her breathless. Emma's voice broke through her daze. Mom, are you crying? Sarah quickly wiped her eyes. Happy tears, sweetie. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy. But as she held her daughter close, Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. This was too perfect, too neat. In her experience, when things seemed too good to be true, they usually were. What was she missing? What else had Mrs. Crawford known that she hadn't shared? And why did she have the nagging feeling that James's dinner invitation would bring yet another revelation? As evening approached, Sarah stood in front of the guest room mirror, smoothing down her only nice blouse, a dark blue button-down she'd bought second-hand for job interviews. Emma sat on the bed behind her, already dressed in her favorite polka-dot dress, swinging her legs as she watched her mother fuss with her hair. For you look pretty, Mum, Emma said, making Sarah smile despite her nerves. The enormity of Mrs. Crawford's letter still weighed on her mind. How could she possibly live up to such expectations? And why did James wait until now to share it? The sound of the front door opening announced James's return. Sarah heard multiple voices, not just James's, and her anxiety spiked. Taking Emma's hand, she stepped into the main house, following the sounds to the kitchen. She stopped short in the doorway. James was there, changed from his business suit into casual slacks and a light sweater that somehow made him look even more handsome. But he wasn't alone. A young man who had to be Marcus, given his striking resemblance to a younger James, was setting takeout containers on the counter. And there, sitting at the kitchen island with a familiar, gentle smile, was Kate. Aunt Kate! Emma ran to hug her aunt, while Sarah stood frozen, trying to process the scene. Your sister's building is fine, James said quietly, coming to stand beside Sarah. I'm sorry for the deception, but I needed time to verify something. Kate's been helping me. Kate extracted herself from Emma's embrace and approached them, her expression a mix of guilt and excitement. Don't be mad, Sarah. When James contacted me this morning and explained everything, I couldn't believe it. But then he showed me the old photos and... What old photos? Sarah interrupted. What's going on? James gestured for everyone to sit at the large kitchen table. Marcus distributed plates while James retrieved a worn photo album from his study. With slightly shaking hands, he opened it to a marked page. This was taken at Roosevelt High School's graduation ceremony, he said, pointing to a photo Sarah had never seen before. Class of 1990. Sarah leaned closer, and her breath caught. There, in the crowd of graduates, was a young woman who could have been her twin. She was standing next to a teenage James Crawford, both of them laughing at something off camera. That's Hannah Mitchell, James said softly. Your birth mother. Sarah's world tilted on its axis. What? No, that's impossible. My mother was Claire Mitchell. She died when I was a baby. Claire Mitchell adopted you when you were 3 months old, Kate said gently. I only found out recently myself, when I was going through Mom's old papers. She made me promise not to tell you until the time was right. Hannah was my first love, James continued, his voice thick with emotion. We were high school sweethearts. But she died in a car accident shortly after this photo was taken, before she could tell anyone she was pregnant. You were raised in the foster system until Claire adopted you. Sarah's mind raced. But your mother, Mrs. Crawford, she must have known. All those years, she was my teacher. She suspected, James confirmed. You look so much like Hannah, and you had so many of her mannerisms. But she couldn't be certain without a DNA test, and she didn't want to disrupt your life if she was wrong. That's why she tried so hard to help you, to give you opportunities. And that's why, when she was dying, she wrote me that letter about you. I took a DNA test 6 months ago, Kate added. That's how James found me. He's been searching for you ever since he read Mom's letter and saw your photo. When I mentioned you were moving to Seattle, she smiled. Well, let's just say your first-class upgrade wasn't entirely coincidental. Emma, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. So Mr. Crawford is my grandfather. The innocent question broke the tension. James laughed, wiping moisture from his eyes. Not quite, sweetheart, but I'd very much like to be part of your family, if your mother agrees. Sarah's head was spinning. This is overwhelming. You've known all this time, since before the flight? I knew you might be Hannah's daughter, James admitted, but I didn't plan on telling you everything right away. I wanted to get to know you first, to see if there might be a connection beyond our past. And Sarah, he reached across the table, taking her hand. There is. What I feel for you has nothing to do with Hannah and everything to do with who you are. Marcus cleared his throat. And on that note, I'm taking Emma and Aunt Kate out for ice cream. Come on, Squirt. He held out his hand to Emma, who looked to Sarah for permission. Sarah nodded, grateful for the moment to process. After they left, she turned back to James. Why didn't you tell me this morning? Why the whole community center story? Because that part is real, James said firmly. Your experience, your dreams, your talent, those are exactly what we need. Hannah's connection to you doesn't change that. If anything, it makes it more meaningful. Eleanor's kitchen was always meant to be yours, Sarah. My mother knew it, and now I do too. Sarah stood, walking to the window that overlooked Puget Sound, the same view she'd seen in that magazine photo of Mrs. Crawford all those years ago. I always felt like I knew her somehow, she said quietly, like we were connected beyond just teacher and student. James came to stand beside her. You were. We all were, even if we didn't know it then. The question is, where do we go from here? Sarah turned to face him. In the fading daylight, his eyes were the exact shade of blue she remembered from Hannah's photo. But when he looked at her, she didn't see the ghost of her birth mother. She saw her own future, full of possibilities she'd never dared to imagine. We build something new, she said finally. Not because of the past, but because of who we are now. Because of Emma and Marcus and this crazy chance that brought us together again. James stepped closer, his hand finding hers. I'd like that, he said softly. Very much. As the sun set over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Sarah thought about all the twists and turns that had led to this moment. The missed scholarship, the years of struggle, the accidental seat in first class. None of it had been accidental at all. It had all been leading here to this kitchen, to this man, to this second chance at a family she'd never known she had. When Emma returned with Marcus and Kate, bursting with stories about their ice cream adventure, she found her mother and James cooking dinner together in the kitchen that would soon become Eleanor's. And for the first time in years, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, not just surviving, but finally, truly living.